We're going to talk about how do we utilize technology in the management of diabetes mellitus, especially among the young people. And the nurse educators have been the backbone of the integrated diabetes clinic, which has been happening at CMC Velo, as well as in the satellite centers across the country. Because as doctors, we have limited time, how we can explain the various ways to take insulin, how to utilize technology, and our nurses are the backbone of our clinic diabetes care clinics. And so today it's my joy to welcome Mrs. Flory Christina as well as Mrs. Ruth Volina, who will be sharing with us their insights in their experience in managing diabetes patients. Mrs. Flory is a senior diabetes educator in the endocrine department. Has been specially trained in type 1 diabetes, diabetic foot management, and has been very actively involved in the academic side of the nurse educator program at CMC Velo. Mrs. Ruth Volina is also a nurse educator who's specially trained in podiatry, and it's our joy to welcome her as well. She is very actively involved in organizing peer group support for the type 1 patients, and she's been actively involved in the clinical trials. And it's such a joy to have Ruth and Flory today sharing their experience with us, and I'm sure we will all benefit much from this time. Over to you, Flory and Ruth. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank Dr. Philippe for your kind words of introduction. So in the next few minutes, myself and my colleague, Ruth Volina, will be sharing with you about utilizing technology in the management of young diabetes and the various gadgets that are available to manage diabetes better in young people. So in the next few minutes, we will be covering about the concept of self-monitoring of blood glucose and the various glucometers that are available and the different advances, and the continuous glucose monitoring using the flash glucose monitoring system, various devices used for insulin self-administration and the challenges faced while choosing these devices, and finally about the insulin pumps. So self-monitoring of blood glucose is a very important advance in the management of patients with diabetes, as it allows patients to test their glucose by themselves, kind of have a very good balance between their diet, physical activity, and the insulin doses. So this is just a representation of how they can use self-monitoring of blood glucose. We call this a FIS diary, where they document the insulin dose, the sugar, on which particular time it was checked, the food that was taken during that time, and their activity patterns. So this is actually an example of one such FIS diary that was monitored by one of our type 1 patients with diabetes, type 1 with pregnancy. So you could see here that she has monitored a 7-point profile. Initially, this was initiated with her as she had too many fluctuations over sugars. So later, at point of time when she could actually balance between the food she took, the activity she did, and the insulin doses, we could shift to the 4-point profile monitoring, as mentioned by Dr. Asha earlier, where we check 3 pre-meal sugars and 1 at bedtime, and if required, a 3 a.m. sugars at midnight. So some of the factors to be considered while we are selecting glucometers, because when we're talking about self-monitoring of blood glucose, it is going to be with glucometers. So cost is a very important factor that we must consider, as most glucometers are not that expensive when they are bought in the first place. Like probably the glucometer cost would be less, but the cost of the strips would be invariably more. So when we choose a glucometer for a patient, it is important for us to look at the price of the cost, the cost of the strips, as these patients are going to buy these strips on a long term. And the maintenance, when we're talking about maintenance, most of these glucometers work on batteries. So ideally, the batteries had to be replaced frequently every time there's a signal of a low battery, and recurrent use of control solutions to check the accuracy of the strips is important. So each of these glucometers are accompanied by their own control solutions, which is used to test the accuracy of the strips. Technique of the use, again, especially when patients are very young or elderly, it is important for us to give them glucometers which has got a very simple way of use, especially some glucometers where the patient had to literally place a lot of blood over the strip. When there is an inadequate sample or less blood placed there, it could give an inaccurate value. Availability of strips is another important factor, as not all strips are available in all parts of the country. Some meters that are available at Vellore may not be having strips in the northern parts of the country. So it is very important for us to choose glucometers where strips are available in all parts of the country. Features, when we're talking about features, this is again an important factor, as it is important for us to choose glucometers which has got a memory backup. So we've had patients in our OPD where they try to fabricate their values or write self-satisfactory values, which might probably lead to inappropriate management of their blood glucose level. So it is really important for us to choose glucometers with a good memory backup. So I would like to discuss some factors that are that could limit the accuracy of the blood glucose values. It is a source of blood. Like we know that the arterial, venous, and capillary blood would have significant differences, and the counterfeit strips. Some of these strips might show inappropriate values like false low or false high values when it is not stored appropriately, or the vial of the strip which is kept open for a long time exposed might show you false values. Or some patients do share strips, like if the strips is not being stored appropriately and the strips are being borrowed by another patient, there could be some inaccuracy in the value showing false high or low values. So some of the environmental conditions, especially altitude and temperature, especially for glucometers which use glucose oxidase enzyme analysis. So there could be a significant difference when there is a difference in the altitude, and exposure of the strips to extremes of temperature might show false low or high values. So especially if the patients are going to have a stock of strips, it is important to store it in the refrigerator so that the exposure of extremes of temperature is avoided. And again, false user techniques again could be leading to false values, like contamination of the sample with sweat, or some patients have the practice of cleaning their fingertips using alcohol swabs, which could dilute the sample and give a false reading, or insufficient sample, probably lesser than what the glucometer required, could show a false low value. So this is one such patient we had in our OPD, a 32-year-old male, a case of young onset diabetes, known for the past 8 years. His A1C was 5.6 and he was on a basal bolus regimen, and he presented with recurrent symptoms of hypoglycemia. So when we did an RBS on him, we found it was 506, and when we looked at his glycemic profile, you could see majority of the sugars are on the higher range. And because the patient was complaining of symptoms of recurrent hypoglycemia, when we counter-checked with the glucometer back in our place, it showed a 54. The problem was that this patient had procured this particular strips from an unreliable source and probably has been carrying the strip along with him for a very long time. When we actually put the same strip in our glucometer, it was showing a very high value. And when the new set of strips used, it was showing a lower value. So we had to treat hypoglycemia for this patient. And unfortunately, he's been looking at these high values and he's been going up on the insulin doses, which was causing recurrent hypoglycemic episodes for him. The next case that I would like to discuss with you was a 32-year-old man who's known case of diabetes for the last 5 years. He was on insulin. He comes to us for routine follow-ups. This is a logbook of his sugar values. His A1C was 10.9. He's very compliant patient, known to use the glucometer and self-injections, and like he was very regular to the clinic. If you could see my slide here, you will see majority of the values are within the target range. We actually give them a target range when they start monitoring. So if you see, most of these ranges are fitting into that. And if you could see, there are many similar values there. There's one 180 and a 180 and a 190 and 198. And it may not be the same for the same thing like how it is looking at the chart. So these values are actually fabricated. We could actually find this out when we had to counter check these values with his glucometer, and it was not found on the glucometer. And you see his A1C is also on the high side here. So some of the considerations we should follow when we are recommending self-monitoring of blood glucose with glucometers is that we need to have a regular evaluation of the technique of how they're using the glucometer. Probably we ask them to show once in front of us like how they are actually monitoring, and to check for any device malfunctions, like look for the battery status, look for the functioning of the glucometer itself, and probably correlate the results with another standard glucometer to see if the values are appropriate, and use a control solution to see if the glucometer is calibrated appropriately. And we should also be able to assess the ability of this patient to use the data from the self-monitoring of blood glucose to adjust his insulin requirements and diet and physical activity. So it is very important for us to make them aware of the various shortcomings of using glucometers and the various errors that are possible, so that a continuous glucometer monitoring requires ongoing diabetes education and training and support on patients of how to use these gadgets. So next, I'll be moving on to some of the advances in glucometers. In the recent past, we've been having glucometers which enable wireless data transfer. A patient can actually maintain a good database where it's paperless. So they're going to have a good track of their sugars, their food, and the activity in their mobile phones. And it also has a facility of indicators of hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia when patients are not able to appreciate the low and high values. Some of these meters have reusable strips. For example, if a strip was placed for the first time, it did not have adequate sample to assess that particular glucose value, the strip can be reused again to place another new drop of sample. So it can be used twice. And some of these meters are also playing a dual role where they also have a blood glucose monitoring system and a ketone system built in the same glucometer. So next we will be talking about the continuous glucose monitoring used by flash glucose monitoring. Just to add a few information from the lecture by Dr. Asha. Some of the features of these flash glucose monitoring system are this measures the interstitial fluid glucose for 14 days. And there are two types of these system. One is the system which does the intermittent scanning, which check the glucose levels every 15 minutes. And this does not give any real-time values there. So every time the data has to be interpreted, this has to be kind of transferred to an application where the reports of the patient can be retrieved. The other type is a continuous scanning system, which probably check the sugars every minute. It provides real-time values as well. Like when you want to know that particular time's glucose value, when the reader is flashed across the sensor, it gives you a real-time value. And it also has an inbuilt blood glucose and blood ketone meters where strips for the blood glucose and blood ketones can be used on the same device for checking the capillary blood glucose. This actually provides a granular alert on the hypoglycemic and hyperglycemic excursions. So this explains of how the sensor is placed on the upper arm of the patient. And the first picture that you see there is actually the reader, which is charged by a USB cable. And the last picture that you see is actually the advanced version of this, where you get the real-time value when you flash the reader across the sensor. So this slide explains of how the data is interpreted. You could actually see the value stored there every 15 minutes, and you can also see the different excursions during different periods of time with the graph on the other side. So the advantages of these flash glucose monitoring systems are it actually provides an average glucose graph of but each particular time of the day. Like for example, if this device is going to stay there for 14 days, it might also give you an alert about how the sugars were in that particular time over a period of 14 days. And it also gives you the frequency of hypoglycemic episodes happened during the placement of the sensor. It gives you a daily pattern graph about the fluctuations, and it also gives you a visual alert of the excursions, like probably if you're going into a hyperglycemic state or a hypoglycemic state. So I would like to share this case with you. This was a 27-year-old lady, known case of type 1 diabetes since the year of 2011. She was on injection NovaRapid thrice daily and glargine at bedtime. Her A1C was 7.1, very much under, she was very much under follow-up with us and in good control. But the challenge we had here was her pregnancy. So she had a lot of fluctuations in her sugars in the early weeks of pregnancy. If you could see the first graph there, you could see a significant fluctuations where she's going into frequent hypoglycemic and hyperglycemic episodes. So the other challenge that we faced was her frequent visits to our department, as she was traveling from a very long place, and it was the pandemic that was keeping her at home. So we put her on this FGMS device, and we could stay in touch with her almost every day. And if you could see towards the end, you could see there is a stable graph there where the sugars are within the control range. So this was in comparison with her monitoring with her glucometer. This was shared by her through phone. So initial weeks, if you could see, there is too many fluctuations there. You see her fasting sugars are beyond 250. And again, she has a drop there. Again, her pre-dinner goes up to 300. And after a few weeks of continuous glucose monitoring, she was able to keep her sugars in very much control, keeping her food and activity also flexible. So there are some limitations as well when you're using this continuous glucose monitoring. The most important limitation where patients hesitate to go on this or can't afford this is the cost, because they are definitely expensive compared to the traditional way of monitoring with glucometers. And the one that gives the real-time glucose monitoring is double the price of the basic one. So there are some physical limitations as well, where patients are allergic to the adhesive that comes with the sensor, or the adhesive that we use to secure the sensors on them. So they have skin rashes where they may have to discontinue or remove the sensor when it happens. Some of them have very minimal pain during the sensor being in place. Some of them have problems in keeping it for 14 days, where there could be problems about disc lodging or the sensor getting disconnected. And another thing is that this sensor has to stay there for 14 days. And if it is getting dislodged or removed in between, it stops working. So it cannot be put again. So the sensor may not be, cannot be used when the patients are going for imaging procedures. It might has to be removed as well. And there's a significant difference of around 15 to 20% compared to that of blood glucose levels. And this particular device does not sense a glucose less than 40 or more than 500. And definitely there is a difference during excursions, like when the patient is taking a diet or a medication or an activity, the blood glucose levels tend to rise first, followed by the interstitial fluid. So there could be a vast difference between the interstitial fluid glucose levels and the blood glucose levels when the patients are going through these excursions. So I end my presentation here, and we will be continuing with the various devices available for insulin self-administration.
Good afternoon, everybody. Coming on to the insulin administration, here in CMC, we follow a practice of calling our patients to our OPD and monitor the technique, how they take, and motivate them for self-administration. It might be the first experience for them, but motivating them to take on their own is our key goal at the end. So we have two different types, 40 IU and 100 IU. So sometimes patients get confused with this 40 IU and 100 IU. So it is more clearly we need to explain that 100 IU is the one that has each division corresponds to 2 units, and 40 units, just 1 unit for 1 division. So I have a case scenario. We had a patient, Mrs. M, a native of West Bengal, came to us for review, but she had frequent hypos. She was in basal bolus regimen, and she was taking the correct dose what we had suggested to her. Her diet intake was very good with lot of fibers in it, but still she had frequent hypos. So when the patient come to us, we just supervise the vial that they use. So when we cross-checked, we found to know that they were using the 100 IU vial which was given in West Bengal, and she was using the 40 IU syringe which was prescribed from here. So mismatching of the insulin and the syringes with the vials can cause hypos or may affect their glycemic control. So coming on to the insulin pens, we have Flex pen, that is temporary pen, which is used for a very short term. We have Novorapid, Rhizodeg, Lantus, Detimer Flex pens, and we also have permanent pen devices which is used for long-term insulin therapy. The advantages of this are they have very fine needle, it is very easy, they can carry it wherever they go, and it is easy to administer also, it is less painful. And one main thing we have to tell them is they have to do the priming, because sometimes the air gets trapped inside. So if they take the injection along with the air, the correct dose of insulin might not be administered. So priming them and making them to prime during each visit is more important. So one more thing regarding the pen devices is the needles also. So we ask them to change the needle after every prick ideally, but they can use for 4 pricks maximum. So if they keep on repeating the needle, if they reuse it more time, you can see the picture there that the needles are blunt, so it can cause laceration, and sometimes the insulin amount will not be delivered fully. So the 6 mm is what we suggest here and we follow here in CMC. If they are using a 8 mm 8 mm needle. We advise them to hold it, pinch it a bit, and take so that the insulin is correctly administered in the subcutaneous tissue and not into the muscular tissue. So I have one more case scenario here. So when I was posted in Chittoor, we had a newly diagnosed a patient. So she was started on insulin, basal bolus regimen. So thrice actrapid was there, and we called her to monitor during the lunchtime. And we found out that the morning AC and PC were around 400 and 500. Ketones were negative, but she was very lean, so that the injection was itself very difficult for her to take on. So when we just assessed her, we just convinced her to take change into the pen device. So immediately the post lunch when we assessed, her sugars was 117. So we wanted to check. We called her for the next day, and when she continued to use the pen device, we found that her sugar control were very much achieved within the targets within a day. So the insulin needle that they use also matters a lot. So the storage of insulin is more important. So people traveling from long, either they stop their insulin or they carry the insulin in their bags when they come from north. So we can suggest them to take the cryos bag in. Cryos bag, that is the insulin travel case. We also have a cello storage box where they can keep the a gel pack and take, or when they travel by flight or air, we can suggest them to carry insulin with the flask with some ice cube inside. So few who are not having these advanced technologies, they can even store the insulin in a earthen pot. So we advise them to store the insulin on the door of the fridge, never to take with the same cold temperature, need to warm up, roll it, and then to administer. During this pandemic, we also had a patient whose storage was not proper. She called to us in our 24 hours bleep, and she told, sister, my reading is only HI. So we asked her to just buy insulin from our CMC and just cross check and see her levels were within the targets. So, and next is the insulin administration site and the skin problems that they face. Either they can go into lipoatrophy or they can go into lipohypertrophy. So, this is one case I want to share with you. In the just previous OPD in a type 1 clinic, we had a patient from Andhra. Her last visit was in the month of April, and due to the pandemic, she could not travel and come here. So we did a teleconsultation on the month of July, and her visit was in the September. When she came here, we found that her sugars were not in the control. You can see that the top bar tells that previously in the month of April, her sugar was within the targets, and when she came during the month of September, the sugars were in the not fluctuating mode. So when we checked her insulin site, she had developed a lipohypertrophy. So advising them or checking them at every visit for the site of administration is also important. So coming on to the insulin pump, this is the most advanced one. So in the 1963, Dr. Arnold, he started the insulin pump, and at present we are using the Medtronic one, model number 715722, and patients are very much benefited out of this. So the insulin pump, it gives more accurate dosing when it is not achieved through the insulin pen. So minute fluctuations like either with 1 unit increase or decrease can cause major hypo or hypos. This insulin pump is very much advised. So this also improves the quality of living, is reported in the type 1, and also insulin requiring type 2 diabetes if they are put on insulin pump. The use of rapid acting insulin for basal needs offers relative freedom from a structured meal and exercise regime previously needed to control blood sugar with slow acting insulin. Insulin pumps make it possible to deliver more precise amounts of insulin that can be injected during a syringe. This supports the tighter control over blood sugars. So we had a patient, 34-year-old Mrs. K. She's a type 1 since 2016. She had a history of abortion in 2018, and she has right breast fibrinoadenoma. Came to OPD visit with 3 weeks of gestational age. She was on Actrapid thrice and Glargine at bedtime. but her sugars were not under control. She had more frequent hypos and hypo unawareness, which was even more complicating. So we convinced her on the insulin pump and she agreed to it. She was admitted, and after the insulin regime, she was on insulin pump. We can see that her targets were very much under control and she didn't have any peaks or hypos in between. So the total daily dose is the basal and the bolus addition, and this is how we maintain the basal. We can set from the timely for a 24-hour pattern. So, and bolus is calculated just before giving the meal time. So this patient was very much benefited out of it, and she delivered a normal, through normal delivery, a healthy boy baby, and she's in touch with us now. So with the advances the technology has brought in, we as a team, we strive forward with the best that we have in all what we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth and Flory, for your excellent presentation. I want to just raise a couple of questions which have come on the chat box. I think Dr. Asha is already responding to many of the questions, so I will not ask those questions. But one of the participants wants to know, among the various glucometers available, would you recommend certain brands are more reliable than the others? And the cost-wise, which would you recommend, considering the cost of strips as well, which you mentioned?
We use Contour Glucose Strips Bayer Company Accenture. The rate is 1,800, which is affordable, and the strip cost is 780. And even more cheaper one is the Cryos Glucometer. The 50 strips cost is only 600. Advanced meters like One Touch Vario is also available, which can be synchronized with the touch phone. So elderly people at home can be, their values can be cross-checked with the other family member as well.
Just to add on to Sister Olina, the most commonly available glucometers are Contour by Bayer and One Touch Ultra and the Accucheck Active. These glucometers are widely available across the country. Some of these glucometers like Cryos and all locally available, and you may not find the strips all the time. So what we widely use is Contour, One Touch Ultra and Accucheck.
The next question is, if you have a patient who's had a laparotomy, a surgery in the abdomen, as well as a femur fracture, and you can't use the thighs and abdomen, what would be the other sites you can suggest? Will it be only be arms or anything else, any other place?
This is quite challenging, but they can still use the flank for insulin administration. And if they're not going to have, if they're having any abdominal wounds and nothing over the thighs, they can still use thighs as a second option. And the upper arm can be used, but self-administration might be a challenge here where they might have to take someone's help for it.
How do you convert between 40U syringe if you want to use it for 100U insulin? Is there any formula you use? One of the participants wants to know.
We don't encourage this conversion basically. Because to be more accurate on the insulin doses, we always prefer that the patient uses the 40 IU syringe with the 40 IU vial and a 100 IU syringe and 100 IU vial. We don't encourage or we don't advise any conversions.
Thank you. And would you like to tell us what is the cost? Because insulin pump seems so attractive, but it's supposed to be very expensive. How much is the cost per month which they have to spend on disposables? And what is the cost of the pump? Are there different types of pumps which you would recommend?
Yes, the basic model of pumps that Sister Olina had told you about is the Medtronic 715 and 722. They cost around 2.5 lakhs to 3 lakhs, and the cost of maintenance is like they might have to be changing these the injection reservoirs, the tubings every 3 days. So it might cost around 4,000 to 6,000 rupees per month. The advanced version of the insulin pump, that is the LG640, that is a recent more pump where they have attractive facilities where you can actually feed the amount of carbs into it and it'll tell you how much of insulin you have to deliver. So they are pretty expensive. They cost from minimum of 4.5 lakhs to 6 lakhs. And the cost of maintenance is the same in both of these pumps.
Thank you. Dr. Sudeep, would you like to ask any questions?
I think Dr. Asha's answered most of them in the box, I think.
So could I just ask Flory or Ruth, could you just tell me what are the main 3 or 4 errors which you commonly see in your clinic day in and day out? The common errors in insulin administration or problems why the sugars are not controlled. What will you give to your as a carry home message for our audience?
Yeah, injecting in the same site and lack of storage, proper storage. They fail to bring the cooling device, just carry it in the handbag or the normal pocket that they have, and lack of insulin adjustment. So we teach them the insulin adjustment every visit they come, and we advise them to bring the glucometer and we cross check the values every time they come.
Okay. Just to add on to what Sister Olina had said, some of the common problems we face with devices is that they keep reusing the syringe. Some of them use one syringe for the one whole vial. Similarly to that of the pen device, they use the same needle till the cartridge gets over. That's one common problem we face, where the needle actually gets blocked with the residual insulin, or it actually gets blunt where the insulin is not delivered. The second problem we commonly face among young people is that when they don't do a priming, when they don't see the spurt of insulin coming out, they tend to inject a lot of air, which is causing recurrent hyperglycemic episodes in them. Another common problem is the malfunctioning of the pen device. So when they're using this, these pen devices are basically mechanical, so they can be used on over a long period of time, but the maintenance is very important. When the pen devices are getting stuck, it may not give the accurate doses of insulin. And another common thing that we face is that they don't use the appropriate cartridge to the device. Some of them try to manipulate the cartridge and try to somehow fit it into the device, which is not giving them the accurate dosage of insulin. So which is limiting us from, having a better glycemic control with them. So we make a simple checklist to check all of these aspects, to check their glucometer, their strips, their pen devices, functioning of the pen. We make them take a dose in front of us so that we make sure that their technique is appropriate, and look for the injection sites to see if they're having any hypertrophy. So this kind of checklist is done for all our patients at every visit to their hospital.
CGM sensors, how much do they cost? There's a question.
Yes, so the basic model that I was talking to you about, which has only the intermediate monitoring, like it monitors every 15 minutes, that cost, the device, the reader costs around 5,000 rupees, and the sensor costs around 2,000 rupees for 14 days. The advanced model that I was talking about, the reader costs around 5,000 to 5,500 rupees, but the sensor costs around 5,000 rupees for 14 days. So for a month, the patient might have to spend around 10,000 rupees for these sensors, for the advanced model.
One of the doctors had a question about the pen fill insulin, whether it's available in 40 IU strength. I don't think so, right? We only have 100 IU. Yeah, that's right.
No, sir, it's only 100 IU. It's not available as 40 IU.
Sure. Anyway, thank you very much, Sister Flory, Sister Ruth, for your time. You've taken out an excellent presentation, and I think we should come all this to a close. We have overshot the time, and I want to just convey gratitude to CMC Vellore, to Dr. Reena, the CME department, and Dr. Nihal for inviting us to moderate the sessions. And it's been our pleasure for Dr. Sudeep and me to chair this session. And we really wish the audience would continue to benefit from such sessions in the future. Thank you very much. So have a good afternoon to all.